So I am very excited to be presenting my first ever video interview with none other than the formidable, is it infamous or famous?
I don't know. I always get confused by that one too.
The inspiring Casey John Ellis. And if you've never heard of Casey,
Extremely kind of you, Luke.
he's a cybersecurity startup veteran and a pioneer of the crowdsourced security as a service model, which is perhaps more lovingly known as bug bounties, among a few other things that might not be called bug bounties, but crowdsourced security, let's leave it there. Yeah. And he's currently the Chief Technology Officer, the CTO at Bugcrowd, and also a founder of Bugcrowd. Mm-hmm. And he is a fellow Australian. Actually, we grew up in the same area, right? Pretty much of Australia, right, yeah. Blue Mountains, which is like an hour west of Sydney. But perhaps in different eras, we grew up there, I think. So
Slightly. I'm not that old, but yeah, a little bit.
And you're a hacker at heart, right? So I believe you're a penetration tester for a while. And
yeah, back in the day.
You've been a keynote speaker at a stack of different conferences. And you're one of those people who just seems to know everyone in the information security field, I guess. And I guess on a more personal note, Casey is someone that I would definitely trust to go to for advice. So up until recently, I kind of knew of you, but I didn't really have an insight into you as a person or the way that you kind of worked until I started working at Bugcrowd earlier this year. Yeah, and, you know, the thing that struck me the most about working with you is that you just seem to be omnipresent throughout the company, and not in like a micromanaging way, just like you've got your finger on the pulse and in every way, in every department, somehow you just seem to know what's going on and be there. And despite being the busiest person that I know, you also seem to just have time for everyone. So that's really, really awesome. Yeah, let's get into it. Do you think I missed anything in the intro?
Well, I don't know. I'd feel like an arsehole to add anything to that. So I think we're good. that was a very flattering intro. I appreciate it. And yeah, I do remember that conversation where we figured out that we'd grown up nearby.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. And definitely it's been a pleasure so far having you in the mix of Bugcrowd and getting to work together. So I've been pretty pleased by that myself.
Oh, that's really nice. I guess one thing I did miss is Troublemaker. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and one of the top things it said was professional troublemaker or something along those lines. So I love that.
Yeah, troubleshoot. I heard, I think it was Mike Cannon Brooks, who's the founder, one of the founders of Atlassian, talk about Australia as a nation of troublemakers and troubleshooters, and I really like that. So I nicked it off him because I do think it sort of sums up a lot of our culture. We've got this like irreverence, and we don't really accept status quo about most things ever, which gets us into a lot of trouble. But it also means we're always looking for ways to we don't just assume everything needs to stay the way that it is, which I think marries in pretty neatly with hacking, and it marries in quite neatly, I think, with entrepreneurship and market disruption as well. And then the troubleshooter part kicks in because, when you think about how we got here, it's kicked out, dropped on a rock and told to figure it out. So we're fairly resourceful as a culture, which I think fits in as well. So yeah, troubleshooter and troublemaker.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, hacking, I'm in it for the lulz. There's a part of me that's very, very definitely still in it for the lulz. I want to see good things happen and pursue potential and make the internet a safer place and all that sort of stuff. But there's this part that just wants to mess with stuff and make it better and is a bit of a rascal. So I try to pay homage to that whenever I can.
That's awesome. For anyone who didn't get the reference about being dropped on a rock and told to figure it out, Australia is a nation of convicts. So we kind of originated in the UK, and the people who were originally sent out to Australia were actually criminals And yeah, so that's our
It was
origin.
it was originally
Literally,
colonized as a prison, and now we're a country that's pretty good at a bunch of stuff. So I think that's not a bad run.
yeah, just a bunch of criminals at heart.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was thinking about where to take this interview, and it's difficult because
Okay.
there are so many things that I want to touch on, and some of them don't necessarily go well into each other. So I thought maybe we'd take it chronologically. So first
Oh,
of
okay.
all, I was hoping that you might be able to tell me a bit about your childhood, like where you grew up, what you were interested
Yeah.
in, were you academic, sporty, what kind of hobbies did you have, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay. So Blue Mountains, you mentioned before, out west of Sydney. Grew up in the bush. My dad was a teacher, and mum, looked after my sister and I before she actually went back to uni when we were in high school. Now she's a clinical psychologist with a master's, running her own practice, and she's a pretty kick-ass lady. But yeah, dad was a teacher. He was like, kind of a polyglot teacher that was really focused on science, like specifically physics. And probably relative to entrepreneurship and hacking, he just take me to school a lot. So I'd like cut days at primary school and go and sit with the year sevens and the year eights, and like he was the kind of teacher that had like, oh, kids, we're gonna like blow something up today, so or just sort of getting up to a bit of trouble as well. And I love that stuff, and it was just, I think both my parents really fostered a curiosity in then like physics, which to me is like the nature of just things. Like how do things, what is the nature of just like our existence, the stuff that we interact with, all that kind of stuff, space, like all of that. Just getting that kind of really put in front of me a lot as a kid. But then also like humans and human creation, engineering and all that other stuff. I just got very I had a lot of that around me as a kid, and I loved it. I just kind of dove into it, started learning stuff, and that's sort of, you can draw a line between that and what I do today. I'm a muso as well, so they actually met on the road. They were both touring musicians. They met. My dad was comp drumming for the band that my mum was in, and they met on the road and started dating, got married. So always had music around. So I've been playing drums since I was 7 or 8 years old.
I didn't
Can
know
play
that.
a bunch.
There you go.
Yeah. I can play a bunch of other stuff, but like drums and if you twist my arm hard enough, doing vocal stuff. Used to do a lot of that performance stuff back in the day, but then kind of grew up and got all serious with businessy stuff. So that tends to go a little bit to the back when that happens, which is sort of where we're at now.
If we dive deep enough, can we find any Casey John Ellis on drums on YouTube?
I literally, it's like, I could do a check out my SoundCloud right now, but I won't.
Oh no.
It's just old stuff. So like drumming, audio engineering, vocals, doing a lot of that. Played in a band that was doing some touring stuff in my late teens. Toured the US a couple of times.
I think you should do
small tours, but it was sort of fun. I've like, honestly, man, my resume up until when I got into IT looks like someone got a shotgun and just sort of fired it at a career board, because it's just a whole bunch of just random stuff.
That
and
is
it's all sort
exactly
of
the
tied
same
together weirdly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Are we going to do the check out your SoundCloud thing?
No. I mean, it's like my handle's fairly obvious, so I think.
Oh, really? I might do some digging. I might put it in the video description if I can find it. That's awesome. You're not the only person at Bugcrowd who surprised me with that as well. There's another, I won't mention the name, but there's another person who's one of my managers that I was like, oh, wow.
There's a crossover. It's a funny, so a guy named Adrian Sawaba on Twitter. He did a talk, RSA, I think it was 2013, on why there's so many bass players why InfoSec is a bass player or something like that. He was trying to kind of tie in the number of musicians he was observing in information security, particularly the kind of progressive areas of it. So less about like the mechanical pieces and more about like strategy and all that kind of stuff. Because there's a lot of musos around. And it was interesting because I'd sort of observed a similar thing, like Christian Frechot. He's a great friend. He's a badass drummer. Like there's just all of these different folk around the place. You're like, oh my God, you've been playing instruments for like yourself. You're a muso too. I don't know, the Venn circles overlap a little bit more than normal, I think, in our space. And that's always intrigued me about
Yeah.
security.
Perhaps it's just creativity. Maybe that's all it
Yeah, I
is.
think so. I think so. It's creativity. I think there's an aspect of like leadership and working as a team as well. Like if you're playing in a band or an ensemble, it's not about you, it's about the song. And as you get good at that, you actually become more attuned to calling the shots of the others that are on stage with you, which I think InfoSec sort of needs because it moves so quick. Do you know what I mean? Like this always like, oh, what burnt down today? Who knows? So you kind of, I don't know, there's the skills crossover there, I think. I'm not sure that we could like put that as I'm looking for musicians on my bounty program. Can you give me some, please? Type of thing. But there is definitely something there.
Yeah, definitely. It's not, yeah, there's a link there somewhere for sure. Yeah. All right. So you kind of had a upbringing with a teacher and a doctor parent, and they kind of fed your curiosity for things throughout your school life. So what happened when you transitioned out of school and into a career? What were you doing then?
So I was originally going to get into, because the other thing about both my parents is they're both entrepreneurs. So mum did a degree and started a practice. Dad actually started, he wrote the original cut of the media curriculum for the New South Wales school system back in the 90s.
No way.
And then that expanded. There wasn't really a media curriculum at that point in time. So he's like, cool, I want to teach kids how to use media to basically, I think his view at that time was that, the more distributed you could make content creation, the less vulnerable it would be to manipulation by, corporate interests or political interests and different things like that. This is in the 90s. So now we've got a different version of that problem where there's too much and the aggregators are kind of causing the issue, but he was trying to address that bit. So he did that and eventually started a TV show on SBS, which, this is another random resume thing. I was a co-host on there for like 2 years. So there's all of that, just, wacky kind of stuff. But
what was the name of the TV show?
It's called School Talk or The Crew. There's like pictures of me when I had way more hair and was clearly a musician. Anyway, so yeah. So end of school, like I didn't really know, like I didn't pay much attention during school. I read the stuff and liked the stuff that was intriguing. I think in hindsight now, it's like, okay, that's actually kind of like an ADHD thing. And I didn't really realize that at the time. It's like, if my interests and my passion and my attention are all lined up, then I can run through walls and nothing stops me. But if that's not true, then it's kind of hard. So high school was definitely a lot of that. But I got accepted into, I was going to do a radiology degree and get into nuclear medicine. So did about 6 weeks of that and said, nope, don't want to do this. And basically dropped out before uni kicked in. And that was sort of when the IT career bit started, because I had a friend who had a consultancy and he's like, hey, do you want to come and intern with me? I'll pay you a little bit. You can help out with stuff and I'll teach you the ropes of IT from a career standpoint. I'm like, well, I don't really have anything else like kind of, future facing. At that point, I didn't view computers as a career. Like to me, I saw computer science and computers as a means to an end, not like a career in and of itself. So that thought hadn't really occurred to me. And he grabbed me and got me doing that. And that's what started the career pathway. Because of course, once I got behind a network, I also, as a kid, had access to computers since like super young, because dad brought them home from work and whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like messing around with stuff and coding and doing all of that, and eventually found my way onto bulletin boards and IRC and started learning about this hacking thing. And the minute I got an IT job, I just started like breaking into stuff at clients. And not as a like sketchy bugger, it was more like, oh, I wonder what this looks like on a production now. Oh crap, I just could do that. And that's probably, and I'm like, whoa, started giving that feedback and people started like wanting to buy it as a service, I'm like, oh, this is cool. I can like satisfy this desire to like think like a criminal, but not be one. You know what I mean? Like that was always the challenge. It's like this rascal troublemaker rather thing.
Yeah.
I have a genuine appreciation for the creativity of criminals because they're like entrepreneurs without rule books, right? And there's something you can like kind of learn from that, and I always find it fascinating. But I've got absolutely no desire to cause harm. Like I've got a fairly high, moral bar when it comes to that sort of thing. So all of a sudden I had this outlet, and I'm like, yes. And that's when the pen testing thing kind of kicked off from there.
Yeah. Man, I think that's the same. I think that thing is the same with so many different hackers. Definitely.
Yeah. I kind of tripped over and found myself in security. Yeet.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. That's what's exciting about it. Hey, it's that criminal aspect to it, but you don't want to be a criminal, but you're fascinated by that whole thing,
I think there's definitely that. There's that. What I've learned since is that there's different. It depends on the kind of the kind of hacker you are and the kind of flavor of hacker that you sort of bring into things. Because there's other folk that they just want to transcend rules, period. And for them, it's less about like the entrepreneurship angle. It's more about like, I just want to see if I can get this to do a thing that it shouldn't. And that's when you end up with these people that can sit and look at a memory register for three hours and pop out a ROP chain or whatever, like just stuff where there's this incredible level of like focus and attention to detail that frankly I'm not capable of, right? But it's the same driving thing. It's like I've got this just unquenchable curiosity to do this thing because I think I can. And then you just sort of build on that.
Yeah. Wow. That is so true. But yeah, there totally are different type of hackers, like you said. And I've noticed that you've said this quote a couple of times in the past where you said, all bug bounty hunters are actually entrepreneurs. So can you explain what you mean by that? I feel like it's closely related to what you're saying now.
Yeah, it is. And really, the idea behind Bugcrowd was like, all right, automation sucks. Like we're throwing all of these things at trying to outsmart ourselves when we write vulnerabilities, and the bad guys when they try to find them with stuff that just basically doesn't work. It's like when everyone suddenly realized antivirus just sort of doesn't really work anymore. Like we need to find a way to do this. So I was observing that and thinking about like, having grown up in the hacker community and being friends with people that have done disclosures and some pretty cool stuff. It's like, how do you connect that with this problem? Because they seem like they're meant to basically meet at some point. How do I make that easy? Right. So that was the kind of the preemptive thought for Bugcrowd and what catalyzed it. And I think the other piece of it, like I often say this, it's like I wanted to solve a really big problem with the resource that I thought I think is available for it. But the other thing I wanted to do was to keep my buddies out of jail. And I'm a big believer in creating opportunity for people, allowing them to connect to opportunity in pursuit of potential. Like that's like the pursuit of potential. That's probably what will end up on my gravestone one day, because it's just, that's the thing that drives me for myself and for other people as well. So that's sort of how Bugcrowd came about. But then with Bounty, it's like, it's not just learning how to hack a thing. It's learning how to like file a tax return. It's learning how to like, manage your time so you're not just rabbit holing off down research 100% of the time and burning yourself out. Like there's a lot of things that bounty hunters probably don't realize that they're learning that are things that a lot of people don't ever get to learn as a function of increasing that skill. And I think it's important to call out because it's
totally,
it's one of those areas where, I was really involved in like social work and youth groups and that sort of stuff as a kid. It's actually where I met my wife. And what I realized looking back is that, a lot of the leadership stuff I learned there was stuff that I actually translated into learning how to be a CEO and now a chairman. It's like, I didn't read a book. It was just, things that I'd absorbed along the way. So I just think making people mindful of what they're learning is a really powerful thing to do.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, because it's easy to miss. There's just so many things that are going on when you try something new, and you can be so focused on the particular objective that you're after that you miss all the other stuff that's going on. And I like to believe that finds its way into your head anyway. But if you're mindful of it, you can actually take it and use it as you go, which I think is like 10 times as powerful.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, that is way cool. So, to move on,
we're getting kind of metaphysical here, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. And we're starting to get into the Bugcrowd stuff too. So before we get to that, I'm assuming Bugcrowd wasn't your first rodeo, wasn't your first business or your first.
No. I did that apprenticeship that I mentioned that grew. So ended up working with the owner of it as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, helping him build it, and it grew, not as a co-founder or a co-owner, but just as someone who was serving another man's vision and building a thing and learning a crap in the process. Grew that out to a decent size for an Australian IT firm, and doing tons of pen tests. This is when like wireless was just a complete shit show, and you could go out, like that was a really fun time to be.
Web.
Yeah, like web one, and just, open access points everywhere, just fun stuff, like stuff that was like, it reminds me a lot. I think web apps are a lot like that today, because there's people just randomly dumping stuff on the internet that they don't really understand, and there's similar deployment anti-patterns that I saw was like wireless back in 2002. It's the same sort of thing. It's like, oh, this shit's cool, let's just put it out there. So that was fun. And then Blaster, I think MSO 3026, which was the Microsoft Vuln, the CVE, or the MS advisory that was used by the Blaster worm.
Yeah,
I was starting to get into like vuln reversing and stuff like that, and exploit reversing at that point. And I saw it, and I saw how it worked, and I'm looking around on the internet, and I'm thinking everyone's plugged directly into a dial-up modem, and no one has a firewall. And like, this shit's going to get turned into a worm, and it's going to knock the internet over, and that's going to happen within the next 2 weeks. And I was out by 3 days. So that was like, I freaking love this. This is awesome, because it was like that convergence of computer science, that like creativity with what I do with it if I was a bad guy, and then trying to like think through all the things that the adversary would need to do to actually make that work.
Yeah.
And then getting it roughly right. Like that was a huge buzz. And that was when I was like hooked on InfoSec as a career at that point. But then I got married, and they wouldn't give me leave for my honeymoon, so I quit.
Oh man, that's a bit rough.
Yeah, they said you can have 2 weeks. I said, I'm taking 7. She's like, no, you can have 2 weeks. I said, I've been working here for 6 years. I'm taking 7.
Yeah.
And if I don't have a job when I get back, I don't want to work here anymore.
Yeah.
And that was how that ended, which was unfortunate, but whatever.
Yeah.
Moved into sales and went from there. So blah, 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 work stuff. Career-wise, what happened when we got back from our honeymoon is my wife, who was going to be the sugar mama for a period there while I figured out the next thing, she actually got laid off because their company downsized. So we were both like newly married, unemployed, and just like, what do we do? So we started for a chunk of time, just, newlyweds having fun as well. So we weren't super stressed, but we knew we needed to figure it out. We started eBaying like extra stuff and duplicates. And what I realized was the things that I've been importing from America to build out a project's recording studio, I could sell them in Australia for 3 to 4 times what I bought them for. Because this was before people were comfortable shipping things across the Pacific.
Right.
Right. So there's a huge arbitrage gain there. And I'm like, oh, we should do this more. And that turned into this like accidental, $40,000 a month import business doing audio gear. And that was kind of my first, that's when I realized I've actually been an entrepreneur this whole time. I just didn't realize that
I was
quite like
wondering how
business.
you knew so much about microphones. That's why.
Yeah. Well, I've been building studios since I was a teenager, but this was what
Right.
kicked that over into like commerce and trade and stuff. So I think that was kind of my first quasi business. Got a job in solutions architecture, and that was when I was doing a lot of work with like federal government here, banks, and all. This is about when PCI was starting to roll out. So got to be on the front row seat for that particular shit show. It was, I actually think it was good for Australia, because the Australian IT community were not doing a damn thing about security at that point in time. And PCI got everyone from a standing stop to doing something, which I think was a net benefit. It clearly, got ahead of itself after that, but that part was cool.
Yeah. I'm a huge believer that like compliance is really important, but it's also not security,
Compliance is important for being compliant.
Yeah.
and it's important for not doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it. Like as soon as you confuse it with anything else, you start to run into trouble, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing that, and then just having all of these like side hustles. So we built out analytics. We built out kind of like Google Analytics for eBay, because that didn't exist at the time.
You built out Google Analytics for eBay. What do you mean by that?
Literally what I just said. So there wasn't an analytics tool that could tell you how people were getting to your listings. So we're like, I could probably, if you put like a JavaScript snippet into the eBay listing and have a ping back that goes somewhere else, you could just pretty much recreate Google Analytics in the context of eBay and render it back to an eBay seller.
So you made like a platform that managed that or something? Oh, cool.
Yeah, I read 4 Hour Workweek, and Tim Ferriss convinced me it'd be super easy. So I thought, fuck it, let's go. And it was working. And then eBay decided they wanted to do it. So they broke it. They broke it overnight and actually implemented their own thing. And what I realized, two things. This was like my little mini MBA through that particular misadventure. Was actually three things. The first was like gaining my wife's trust and partnership in actually doing this stuff, because we went through it together. When it failed, we failed together and looked at like the retro and all that sort of stuff. And it's just like, failure is not really that bad if you manage it properly. And take those risks well, then it's nothing to be scared of. You just need to be mindful, right? Again, there it is again. That's another life principle. It's like cybersecurity, a bad day for us looks like a crappy consulting job somewhere doing things that we don't like, but still basically keeping the lights on. So I think that affords us the opportunity to take a few risks. And that's advice I give a lot of entrepreneurs, because it's like, but I've got to have everything like, it's like, nah, dude, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So there was that, but then there was platform risk. Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I learned that. And also, like, if you're going to build a thing that's dependent on a bigger thing, make sure you're talking to the bigger thing. Because in hindsight, had I done that properly, that would acquired. That tool would have been acquirable pretty early on by eBay. And I just didn't, that just wasn't on my radar about how to do all of this stuff back then. So that's why that didn't happen. So so did that for a bit long, did that sort of thing.
Your import audio business, importing audio gear. Like
these are sequential, by the way. This is not all at the same time.
and then you had your eBay, basically Google Analytics type thing going on after that, right? Sequential, right?
And this is as I'm working. This is as I'm working as a solutions architect.
Right. So these are side hustles we're talking about.
Essentially, yeah.
But then what did you think? Like, is there like an underlying principle where you see opportunity to start a business like that? Like, is there something that you're looking for, or are you just open to anything that you think might be an opportunity? Like,
I think I mean, it's how I do this has changed as like my opportunity has changed. Because obviously, you know, this is sort of, you can sort of see the story kind of winding its way north as we go. You know, it's like a 20-year overnight success story, because everyone, you know, Bugcrowd started like, who the hell's this Casey guy? And I'm like, I've been actually working on this for a really long time. I just haven't been super noisy about it. So I think it's different now, but like the core of it is, you know, connects latent value with unmet demand.
Yeah.
It's basically see a problem that I think to actually take it on as an entrepreneur. So that's an opportunity, like latent potential, unmet demand. Can you plug it in a way that you can add value to in the middle? Because that becomes the thing that you get to actually build a business from, the way you plug it in together.
Right. So and when I think about it, that's exactly what all the businesses have been, right? Like latent potential is like audio equipment in Australia, and you met that. Yep. And then people want analytics on their eBay listings, and you met that. And then Bugcrowd is like people needed crowdsourced security. So
yeah, people need people, and there's a lot of people that want to help. So like, how do you plug it in? So now it's, you know, I've progressively added more of this element of just trying to see around corners as well. It's like, what's the market going to need next? So I do a lot of like work with startups. Like I'm on the advisory board for a drone platform out of Nevada, because that's going to eventually be a thing. Like it's not a thing right now, but it will be. So there's that sort of, you know, those sorts of things where, okay, that's, if you kind of throw the ball forward 5 years, this is where we're going to be. I'm trying to actually use, you know, some of my time, a chunk of my time, to be able to engage in that stuff and just continue to learn, because that's going back to what you were asking before. It's all about, it's just data, and you're processing it and you're trying to figure out like how to move things around into the optimal spot and position yourself in the middle of all of that. That's kind of what I do.
So I like, one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about a lot lately and reading a lot about and things like that is basically like what sets apart someone from who is, what sets apart someone who is really successful to someone who isn't. And, you know, like most people are, you know, it depends on your definition of success, I guess, but it's pretty objective to say that some people are like, very successful, like they've started companies or whatever, and other people are just happy like working a job, even though they might have ambitions to like do all these things. It never happens. So I think I
wrote a thing on this because, you know, we're probably 3 years into Bugcrowd and I'm feeling all like heady and
mighty.
No, because you do, like, it's a rush, right? And it continues to be a rush. You're like, oh my God, I'm like God's gift to everything. And it's a nice feeling, but you got to keep it in check, and actually maintain your humility as well. Otherwise, you stop learning, and that's when you get knocked over, I think. Came back to Australia and actually went to a supermarket, like a, you know, grocery store here. I forget which country I'm in. It's like, what do you call those again? And the lady who was my supervisor when I was a 15-year-old was still working there. and I walked out and I'm like, oh, I hate to be like her and da 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 da. And then I caught myself doing that. I'm like, that's ugly. Like that can't actually be the truth of your different choices and your different circumstances, because that just something about that's just not right. And it like, I ended up writing a blog about it on cogs and levers. Like, some people are wired up, they want to be a cog. They want to fit into they want to find their place in the world. They want to fit into it. Some of them want to become a bigger cog over time. Other people just want to stay the same size and just, that's their thing. Other people like me want to be a lever, right? So it's like a lever changes the state of things. That's like the whole idea of being a cog drives me insane. To me, it's just no, I don't ever want to do that. But a lever, I can get behind that. But the thing is that
I think that like going back to the bug bounty hunter thing, I think that bug bounties attract levers. Like I think that a lot of, you know, and going to the whole
That's a
entrepreneur
fun
thing
thought.
too, and a
Yeah.
lot of people who are watching this video are
Yeah.
probably watching it because they're levers, or they want to improve themselves in
Yeah.
some way, and they want to like change the state of things, as you put it,
I
which
think
is a
that's
really
right.
cool way to put it. But what I wanted to ask you is, what sets cogs and levers apart? Do you think it's just commitment, or do you think it is what's the word, like just what they want, or
Just wiring. It's wiring. I fundamentally believe it's a matter of like nature and nurture. So what are you wired up to be most suited to do?
yeah,
And then what have you been raised? Like, what are the different things, you know, as you were brought up or whatever? Like, I was brought up to basically believe that anything can be possible. It's like, yeah, the sky's the limit. Like, a whole bunch of stuff's going to change. There's all of this at your disposal. You got a big world to play and go play.
yeah,
And I just believe that, and I still do. So, plus, I've got this brain that can't stay still. So you put those two things together, and it's like, all right. I think for cogs, it's like because there are hunters, you know, as I said before, it's like the folks that pop like iOS, right? Or you know, right, like crazy, like nation state level, like the kind of vulns that you don't see all that often in the bounty hunting space.
mm,
They tend to be incredibly methodical, you know, often quite introverted, like
that's true.
they're mathematicians and people that dig through, and they kind of look like cogs in a way, because their wiring is more focused on doing the same thing over and over again,
Right.
and then looking for the exception and pulling it out and then weaponizing it, and off you go, right?
Yeah.
So I think new bounty hunters, like the new breed that are kind of coming into it now. You're right. I think that's more likely to be a lever and someone who like wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to pursue things.
Right.
You see people like starting up their own consultancies on the side because they've suddenly realized that they can. Yeah, it takes all kinds. Like I think that's the beauty of this model, is that cybersecurity, like the internet's being written by all kinds of different people, and it's being attacked by all kinds of different people. So logically, you need all kinds of different people in the middle to figure out what can go wrong. This is just another extension of that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And just a random question, not super related, but in terms of, because I know people are going to want to know this, do you have any like resources, like books or podcasts, documentaries or whatever, that you feel were an integral part of your development, either like personally or as an entrepreneur or a hacker or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm always reading or listening to something and making sure that something is not just Twitter.
Yeah.
um, 4 Hour Work Week it's an objectively bad business book. Like if you go through and just look at it as a manual, it's terrible for that. But as this is possible, go start something, like just shot in the arm, and some of the practical like tips it gives. I actually credit that book for a lot of like getting me moving on this stuff.
That's so funny. Where do you remember where you were in your life when you read that? Like what were you doing at the time?
It's just after the eBay thing had gotten going.
Right.
So that was because that was a total accident. Like it was just like, and then I'm starting to think I really like business. I should start to learn some stuff. So I started looking around and heard about this book and read it, and it's like, okay, I could probably do that. That's sort of how that. So yeah, 2006, I want to say.
Yeah.
Around that sort of time.
I remember I discovered that book when I was working as a developer. I just gotten back from working on cruise ships and being a musician, whatever. I was working as a developer. It was like the only job that I could get. Like I had to do job interviews from a ship, and I had to like basically have a job as soon as I get back and land on my feet. I hadn't even found a house yet to live in. And I was just like, turned up to this PHP dev job basically, and I started reading that book for some reason. I don't know why it jumped out to me, but it encouraged me to like work from home. And it basically, like the 4 Hour Work Week lays out the plan of like, this is how you tell your boss that you're going to work from home now.
Yeah.
So I basically did that.
Yeah.
And that was a total life changer for me, because it gave me more time to basically like pursue other things as well, instead of just, working myself to the bone
Yeah.
on a bus.
So it sounds like we had a similar experience. Like 4-hour work week was I want to do that. Like I want to pursue, it really comes down to like, I want to pursue mastery. 4-hour work week was what I had in mind when I came up with, the scariest moment in all of this was the first time I quit my job. And it was literally like, it was the recession. My wife was pregnant. We just bought the house that I'm in, and I faked my last 2 paychecks to get the loan, right? So we were running it like fast and loose. But I knew what I'd done was I'd pretty much actually gone through what Tim Ferriss had said in 4-hour work week around like building up your value to the point where you're indispensable, and then you quit and then sell your services back in, and that becomes the platform that you start to build your business from. That is exactly what I did. And it was scary as hell. Everything since then has gotten, most things, it's been a few scary things since, but most things since have been a lot less scary, because it's just, that's when you kind of like, okay, I'm cutting the leash now and I'm going to go out and
take the leap.
Kill it and eat it myself. Like that's a big deal, especially when you're married and you've got like some stuff hanging off you as well. Yeah.
So on that,
Losing My Virginity by Richard Branson, Blink by Malcolm Gladwell are the 2 others, but we could talk about both of those books for half an hour, so we won't do that.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely I haven't read either of those, so I'm going to read both of those now. On that though, just another question about what we were talking about. I know that a lot of people are on the fence about this, and I've been there in the past too. I'm not really thinking about jumping ship right now from like my job, but definitely been at times. I've definitely had times where I've been like,
can you hit pause for a second? No.
I've been like, I want to quit my job, like at times in my life,
Yeah.
And I've really thought hard about being like, should I start a business and do that or whatever? So there's a lot of different opinions on this. When do you think is the right time to do that? And also, like, when do you think is like, do you think you're ever ready? Or do you think people should just make the leap more often? Like, is it really just fear that's holding people back? Or do you think you really need like a pretty solid plan of action? You got to be pretty sure it's going to work. Or are you more of a throw it in the deep end, kick in the door, clean up the mess later type?
Yeah. What I will say in terms of thinking about leaving, one thing that I'm a big believer in is the idea of like how you leave one thing is how you'll enter the next.
Right.
So it's like, like rage quit, foul attitude, like you slacking off, doing all that other stuff, and you just kind of stomp out the door and like, I'm going to start a business. It's probably not going to go that great, because you haven't, I mean, for starters, you haven't honored your employer, which I think is a pretty important just life principle. I say that as like, I'm still employed, right? I've built a company, but I'm employed by Bugcrowd. So that still applies to me, even in the position that I'm in now. So, but also, it's just, it doesn't set you off on the right foot mentally, I think. So there's that. But yeah, is there ever a right time? It's like, proposing to your wife or asking some, it's like proposing to your wife, or it's like, I can't think of many other decisions that are similar. It's,
having a child.
You don't know. Well, that's not always a decision. Hi, daughter. It's like, hey, she was a happy accident and she knows it, so that's fine. But like the idea that you never know, you just choose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like there's no right answer. And if there was a right answer, there's no way to actually find it. All you can do is choose to go for it. And I think that's that's the big thing for people to just take a deep breath and kind of accept, because I think that's just true. Now that said, it's not like, YOLO, let's go start a business. I'm just going to like throw caution to the wind and give my boss the bird tomorrow and whatever. Because, it like part of what I was doing in that like crazy setup that I was talking about before was doing the math. It's like, okay, if this doesn't work out, if I can't do it, what's my keep lights on scenario? What does like abject failure look like? Can I stare that in the face and have it blink first?
Yeah.
If I can do that, then I'm good to go.
That reminds me actually of the whole
important.
stoicism thing. You know how Tim Ferriss is really into stoicism, going back to Tim Ferriss. Yeah. It's like, a stoic practice is like basically living the failure. Like if the worst that can happen to you is that you've got to like live on the street, then go and sleep on the street for a week, so you know what it feels like, and then you won't be scared of it, and you can like go out and make those decisions fearlessly.
I'm a huge believer in that. Like I worked on the internet out of Chiang Mai in Thailand for, I think it was 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Lived like a local in terms of like food and all that other stuff, because I wanted to test whether or not that was possible and whether or not I could be comfortable with something like that, like moving somewhere I could drop my burn rate down to as close to zero as I would be comfortable doing, and then survive like literally just by hustling and getting stuff done. And it was fine. It was one of those ones where it's just like, whatever.
I love how you call it a burn rate for your personal finances. Like you're such a company owner.
I've been in the valley too long, man. It's bad.
All
right. You're right. Nice call out. I feel terrible now.
Yeah. I know we're running up on time, but just a couple more questions. We've talked a lot about like macro decision making, but I want to know what your daily routine looks like too, like the decisions you make, micro decisions, like you wake up in the morning, do you need to exercise? Like, how do you take care of work-life balance, things like that?
Try not to do green screen things while the sun's setting is a key to that. Look, I think, let me just fix that real quick, because that's going to annoy me. Hello. We'll see how we go. I think work-life balance, whatever. It's one of these things where you don't. So I blog a lot. What I try to do is when I sort of discover a principle that I think is going to work for me universally long term. I'm a massive reductionist, like in terms of like, okay, can you take something and make it as reduced to its core principles as possible, that you can then build on top of that and not have it ever need to be revisited. Like I love doing that. It's kind of this constant mental exercise I'm running on basically everything, and including myself and decisions like that, right? So the ability to make decisions with your time and different things like that, it's like, all right, I never want to sacrifice my family for what I'm doing for work. So therefore, if the family is chronically suffering because of decisions that I'm making from a work standpoint, then I'm probably doing something wrong at work because I chose them first.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, and it actually becomes, because that can sound sort of onerous and whatever, but it's actually really useful as a barometer, because you kind of like, okay, like that actually becomes, because you got to burst sometimes, you got to get stressed and do, if you want to do hard things, sometimes they're hard, and that's just what we've decided to do. But this is just starting to flip me out now. Whatever you chose first, it's like just being deliberate about that and then coming back to it and revisiting it is a big thing. And look, I think that the most dangerous thing, like some of the keys to, I think, how I've been able to do the things I've done so far is just being like working as hard as I can to be brutally honest with myself about what I can and can't do.
Yes.
And then including people in that. So like, to me, humility is not, people hear humility and they think it's about like apologizing for everything and not saying you're very good at stuff. It's not. It's about saying this, like these three things, if we go to the mat, I'm going to win. Right. But then there's everything else. So can you help me with other stuff? Like that to me is the essence of true humility. And I think it's incredibly powerful if you can.
Well, it's cool too. If you're in a position that you're in, you've got the what's the word? I guess the ability to surround yourself with people who can do the stuff that you can't do, you know? So.
Yeah, but I've always done that. That's the thing. Like, and you're right, because it gets like, as you do more stuff, you get more and more opportunity to have conversations with, I've given up. You have more and more opportunity to have conversations with people that have done crazier and crazier things. But it starts, you know, I got into startups. I saw a guy on Twitter one time talking about startups and cybersecurity, and I'm like, he seems cool. So I literally DM'd him and said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Like, I'd love to just grab coffee and hear you talk about your experience for a little bit, because I'm just trying to understand how all of this works. Would you be up for that? And he said yes. And he was actually one of the first investors in Bugcrowd, like, wow, 4 years after that. And he's still like, he's a dear friend. He's doing a random t-shirt thing that I posted in the work Slack today that you might've seen. Like, yeah, but he was a .com Yahoo guy.
Wow. Yeah.
Who then connected me in with people who'd done like bigger stuff than he had. And then on and on it goes. And it's just like exploiting a network in a sense. Like, you just kind of keep pivoting based on what you want to do next. Like, I think that's what I'm trying to get across here, is that opportunity is always there for anyone, period.
Yeah.
I think at this point in my career, it's a lot easier for me because, you know, doing stuff like Bugcrowd opens doors, and that becomes my responsibility to actually use those wisely and take advantage of them. But I don't think it's limited to folk that are in my position at this point in time.
So everyone should be aiming to surround themselves with people who can help them.
I'm a huge, you know, you know as much as you know, and then there's everything else. So it's like, figure out the things that you want to do next, find people that have been where you are, have gone where you're going, and hopefully have gone a little bit beyond that. And then ask them a bunch of really dumb shit and try to learn from it. You know what I mean? Like, sorry?
I've definitely done a bit of that in my time. I can't remember what the situation was, but I remember saying just recently to someone that I do ask a lot of dumb questions, but I feel like that's one of my superpowers, is like, I'm okay about doing that.
But that's humility, right? Because it's like, I think the reason, this is advice I give to entrepreneurs going through accelerators and stuff a lot, because I think one of the misconceptions people have is that you got to rock up and impress the hell out of whoever you're talking to, and that's like the first thing that needs to happen. So you get so wrapped up trying to do that, and I still do this now. Like, I still catch myself doing that with people that I meet today, right? You get so wrapped up in making sure you create a good impression that you forget to like actually build the connection and try to exchange value and do all of that sort of stuff. So I think just remembering that, you know, humility is attractive to most people. It's definitely attractive to the people that you're most likely to learn from. You know, the people that find it unattractive or whatever else, you're unlikely to learn anything from them from building a relationship anyway. So it doesn't matter.
Good advice. All right. I think we could keep talking for hours and hours, and I've got a bunch of things that I wanted to get through too, but I think we'll have to leave it there. And so any parting comments, Casey? Advice for people who either want to be a better human or are very interested in entrepreneurship or hacking?
How to life good. 42, I think, is the answer to that. No, look, surround yourself with good people. back yourself hard. Don't be afraid of having a dream and just continuing to go for it. You know, be persistent, but at the same time as you're persistent and gritty, be kind to yourself as well, because failure is a part of the pursuit of success. And you know, both of those sides of the coin are really important. I'd probably leave it at that.
Far out. Awesome. Thank you so much, Casey. And I'll let you get back to your family.
Thanks, mate. You too. Cheers.
See you, mate. Bye.
Bye.